that brings us to like kind of our part two segment of story tropes you want to avoid, because I don't know how many times that my friends have uh, been upset with this this tired narrative of "you're so inspiring." You hear this over and over and over again, and the message, almost 100%, is, "I don't want to be your inspiration."
Yeah,
So
one of my favorite things, and it's in the essentials section of the accessibility doc, because to me it is key, is Stella Young gave a lecture, a TED talk called "I Am Not Your Inspiration, Thank You Very Much." There is something that we call inspiration porn. That's the term that has been coined for it, and it's the term we use in the community about those, the motivational posters that will show an amputee running a doing a race, or just showing disabled people doing things, or the videos where it gets framed in this very inspirational light. And the problem is, and the reason it's referred to with that term, is it is showing disability as through the lens of inspiring and making non-disabled people feel better about their lives because they are not disabled. That if they are disabled, their lives would be so much worse and so much harder, and so much sadder. And
so
that's
feel better about
just not
yourself.
true. Yeah.
It's
And so
really gross.
it becomes this exploitative objectification.
Yeah.
We deserve better than that. and it's some of the only representation we get so much of the time. It's very rare that you get complex, nuanced disabled characters, or you get disabled characters just like in the world doing their job and having regular jobs. I will note that the rates of disabled unemployment and underemployment are vastly higher than non-disabled people. And that is in large part due to discrimination. But yeah, this idea of framing our existence as inspiration for just doing the basic things that everybody does. And granted, some days it does feel like it's an insurmountable task to like get up and get breakfast. But I think everybody has those days. Right? So I think that's one thing to stop doing, is framing us as inspirational in that way. I think the next thing is thinking about villains. Often facial differences, disfigurement, and disability.
That almost Darth Vader syndrome is like I sometimes call it, of like Darth Vader is missing several limbs and thereby is a villain. And it's really hard to watch any 80s television show and not see someone with a scar on their face and being blind of one eye or missing a limb, and therefore they're a villain. It's a very tired trope.
It's this idea of signifying internal moral decrepitude with an external symbology. And it's pervasive. So I think that becomes, and that's true with mental health issues as well. Mental health is vastly stigmatized in villains. So I think that's a huge trope to watch out for. Again, it's putting people into the world, not caricatures. And then the next one that's a huge one is the idea of better dead than disabled. And this is something we see over and over in things like $1 Million Baby, Me Before You, like the list goes on, where people think that because you're disabled, your life is over and you would be better off dead. And it's so completely untrue. There are, wheelchair BMXers. There are, people do everything. We have Harvard law graduates who are deafblind. Like it's not this tragic thing. And so again, that stigma creates that pity thing. So I think avoiding all of those tropes are really important. And the cure narratives too. So I think those are some of the major storylines that we see very, very frequently with disability. Also putting people into relationships. If you're going to have a world where you have relationships and you have people who are dating, you know, framing disabled people as having partners and, you know, children and being appealing and sexy and, you know, part of the world in that way as well, because that also is very rare, and that ties to kind of the infantilizing and the objectifying. But yeah, I think those are all things that are really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a big trope to avoid. Are there any other terms that are really good to avoid? Because I mean, I know there's a very long list, but
Yeah. So I'm about to say some things that are slurs that are going to be probably startling for some people to hear that these are terms that are offensive. But yeah, just content warning on that front for people who may want to not hear them. Dumb. Dumb is a term that is referencing deaf people and intellectually disabled people. It's equating the two, and it's also framing intellectual disability as a bad thing. Lame refers to physical disability. Cripple is a big one. Cripple, crippling, crippled. Those are all really, gosh, it's hard to even like. These are words that have a lot of oppression behind them. To put this in context,
and they're so pervasively used like every single day.
Yeah. Cripple is a reclaimed term at this point. So disabled people may say that word, but non-disabled people, it's an offensive term.
Right.
You have to keep in mind that for centuries at this point, disabled people have been kind of hidden away and put in institutions, and eugenics have been an issue. And this continues on. Like, this is not, ableism kills people regularly, and particularly now, it's been really deadly for the disabled community right now, disproportionately, and because of ableism, because people think our lives have no worth. So when I talk about the way that language reemphasizes that marginalization and the way that people think about disability, I'm not saying this lightly. I'm not saying this to like police people's words. I'm not. You can use the language you want to use. You can call people crazy. You can you know, use terms that refer to you know, there are even words I won't say, the R word and things like that. Like, but just know that when you're saying them, just be aware that of what you're saying when you're saying them. You know, so I really highly recommend that people take a look at the language list on Lydia Z. Brown's website and just read through it once and know, because a lot of people don't know, and that's absolutely true. These are words deeply rooted in our culture, but they hurt every time. I feel a sting every time I hear them used. So, yeah.